You might think you're hesitating because you're unsure, but most hesitation isn't confusion, it's protection. This channel isn't here to give you tips, or push you, or tell you what to do. It's here to explain what's happening inside the system, so the pattern stops feeling personal. Because when you're stuck, your brain often starts asking for something it can't actually get: certainty. Not a good plan, not a reasonable chance, certainty. And once certainty becomes the requirement, movement becomes impossible, by design. Today we're going to unpack why the mind treats uncertainty like danger, why it delays decisions, even when the decision is obvious, and why waiting until it feels right can quietly become a long-term loop. If you've ever felt ready in your head, but frozen in your body, this is usually why. The brain has two jobs that often conflict. One is to help you function. The other is to keep you safe. Safety sounds simple until you realize what the brain counts as safe. It doesn't just mean physical safety. It also means predictable, familiar, explainable, controllable. Certainty is the cleanest form of that. Certainty means the nervous system can relax because the outcome is already known. But real life doesn't offer that. So instead, the brain builds a substitute. It makes you believe that if you think long enough, research enough, plan enough, or rehearse enough, certainty will eventually appear. And this is how overthinking becomes a coping mechanism. Not because you love thinking, but because thinking feels like control. The mind isn't stalling because it's lazy. It's stalling because not moving is the only way it can guarantee safety. Here's the part people miss. The brain doesn't wait for certainty because certainty is realistic. It waits for certainty because certainty ends discomfort. Uncertainty creates a specific internal sensation, exposure, like you're stepping into a space where you can't fully protect your identity, your competence, or your future story about yourself. And the brain hates open-ended exposure. So it creates a rule: I'll act when I'm sure. That rule sounds mature. It sounds responsible. It sounds intelligent. But it often means I will only act when I can't feel risk. And risk isn't removed by waiting. Risk is removed by certainty. And certainty is removed by reality. So the rule keeps you in limbo. Not because you're choosing limbo, but because the nervous system prefers a stable discomfort over an uncertain outcome. Stable discomfort is familiar. And familiarity registers as safety, even when it costs you growth. This is why you can know something and still not do it. Knowing is cognitive. Doing is physiological. Doing means tolerating the feeling of uncertainty in real time, the lack of guarantee, the possibility of regret, the chance of looking foolish, the fear of not being who you hoped you were. And when those feelings rise, the brain doesn't argue logically. It interrupts. It produces delays that look rational. Let me just think a bit more. Let me wait until I'm in a better place. Let me make sure I'm not making a mistake. Let me gather more information. These aren't lies. They're protection scripts. Because if the brain can keep you preparing, it can keep you safe. And preparing feels productive, so you don't notice the loop. But the loop is simple. Certainty becomes the price of action, and action never gets paid for. To understand this pattern, you have to separate two things that feel identical but aren't: danger and uncertainty. Danger is a real threat. Uncertainty is a prediction gap. But your nervous system reacts to both in almost the same way. That's because, from a survival perspective, uncertainty used to mean possible danger. If you couldn't predict what was coming, your safest option was hesitation. Waiting increased survival. Moving too early could mean exposure. Your brain still runs that ancient equation, even when the modern situation isn't actually threatening. So when you hesitate before sending a message, starting something new, making a decision, or changing direction, your system isn't malfunctioning. It's applying an old rule to a new environment. The problem isn't that your brain is wrong. The problem is that your brain is early. It reacts before evidence arrives. It pauses before reality answers. And because the pause reduces tension, your mind learns something powerful. Waiting works. Relief is the reinforcer most people don't notice. When you delay a decision, something inside you softens. The pressure drops. The urgency fades. The discomfort that was pushing on you loosens its grip. That relief feels like proof that waiting was the correct move. But relief doesn't always mean something was resolved. Often it just means something was postponed. The brain doesn't track the difference very carefully. It simply records, hesitation reduced tension. And whatever reduces tension gets repeated. That's how hesitation becomes a habit. Not because you chose it, because your nervous system learned it. From then on, uncertainty automatically triggers delay, and delay automatically produces relief, and relief confirms the behavior. It becomes a closed loop. You think you're choosing to wait, but your system is actually rewarding the wait, and once a pattern is rewarded, it doesn't feel like resistance, it feels like logic. This is also why advice rarely breaks hesitation. Advice talks to your thoughts. Hesitation lives in your body. You can understand perfectly what you should do and still feel unable to do it. That gap isn't hypocrisy. It's architecture. The cognitive system evaluates options. The nervous system evaluates safety, and safety always wins. So when people say things like just go for it, stop overthinking, take action, they're speaking to the wrong system. They're talking to reasoning while the gatekeeper is sensation. Your mind can agree, your body can refuse. And when that happens, it can feel confusing, frustrating, or even shameful. Not because you lack discipline, but because two systems are running different priorities at the same time. One wants movement, the other wants protection, and protection is faster. Certainty, in this context, is really a feeling disguised as a requirement. People often say they're waiting until they're sure. But what they usually mean is they're waiting until they feel safe enough. That distinction matters, because certainty is external. Safety is internal. External certainty almost never arrives. Life rarely provides guarantees, but internal safety can shift, slowly, quietly, gradually, as familiarity increases. The brain doesn't actually need certainty to act. It only needs enough safety to allow movement. But if your system learned that uncertainty equals danger, then safety won't rise on its own. It will wait for proof. And proof only appears after action. So the system stalls. It wants safety before movement, but safety increases after movement. That's the paradox. And once you see that pattern, hesitation stops looking like weakness and starts looking like a loop. Loops like this persist because they feel protective, not restrictive. If hesitation felt dangerous, you'd stop doing it. But hesitation doesn't feel dangerous. It feels cautious, responsible, thoughtful, even intelligent. That's why it's so persuasive. Your mind can generate convincing explanations for delay that sound rational. I just need more time. I should think this through. I don't want to rush. I'll start when I'm ready. All of those statements can be true in certain situations. The difficulty is that the same language is also used by avoidance. The brain doesn't label the difference clearly. It uses identical signals for both preparation and postponement. So unless you know what to look for, you can't tell whether you're being careful or being held. That ambiguity keeps the loop alive. Because if hesitation feels wise, you won't question it. And what isn't questioned becomes automatic. Another reason hesitation feels convincing is that the mind prefers internal problems over external risk. An internal problem is predictable. You can think about it, analyze it, rehearse it, revisit it. It stays contained inside your head. An external action, on the other hand, introduces variables you can't control. Other people's reactions, unexpected outcomes, irreversible consequences. From your brain's perspective, internal uncertainty is safer than external unpredictability, so it keeps you inside, not physically, cognitively. It redirects energy away from action and toward analysis, not because thinking is better, but because thinking is safer. That's why you can spend hours mentally preparing for something you could physically begin in minutes. The preparation feels productive, but it doesn't move anything. And because movement never happens, the brain never gets new evidence, which means the original uncertainty never updates. So the loop stays closed. It's important to understand that hesitation is not laziness. Laziness is a judgment word people use when they don't understand what's happening underneath behavior. Most hesitation is actually sensitivity. Sensitive systems detect possibility faster. They notice risk earlier. They simulate outcomes more vividly. That heightened detection can be useful. It helps with planning, awareness, and caution. But it also means the threshold for action becomes higher. If your system predicts too many possible outcomes, movement feels heavier. Not because the task is bigger, but because the perceived uncertainty is larger. So while someone else might move quickly, you might pause longer. Not due to lack of motivation, but because your internal system is running a more detailed scan. From the outside, that can look like reluctance. From the inside, it feels like responsibility. And when hesitation feels responsible, it becomes very hard to challenge. The brain also has a strong preference for patterns it already knows. Familiar patterns require less energy. They're efficient, automatic, predictable. Even when they're uncomfortable, they're still familiar, and familiarity signals safety. New actions don't have that advantage. Anything unfamiliar forces your system to allocate attention, awareness, and monitoring. That costs energy, and your brain is designed to conserve energy whenever possible, so it quietly favors the known over the unknown. Not because the known is better, because the known is cheaper. That's why people can stay in situations they don't even enjoy. The discomfort is familiar, and familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Change, from the brain's perspective, isn't judged by whether it improves your life. It's judged by whether it disrupts prediction. And prediction is what your nervous system trusts most. Prediction is the brain's main strategy for staying stable. Your nervous system is constantly forecasting what will happen next. It predicts sounds, reactions, sensations, outcomes. Most of the time you don't notice this process because it runs automatically in the background. But when something unpredictable appears, prediction fails. And when prediction fails, the brain interprets that as potential danger, not actual danger. Potential. That distinction matters. Your system doesn't wait to confirm threat before reacting. It prepares in advance, just in case. Preparation feels like tension, caution, hesitation, delay. Those sensations aren't random. They're signals designed to slow you down until the system feels certain again. The problem is that certainty rarely comes before action. Most certainty arrives after movement, not before it. So if you wait to feel sure before starting, you end up waiting for a signal that only appears once you begin. And that's how hesitation sustains itself. There's also a timing illusion involved. When you imagine doing something, your mind simulates it instantly. You can picture the outcome, the process, even the possible problems in a matter of seconds. Real action doesn't work like that. Real movement takes time, effort, and unfolding steps. So when the brain compares imagined progress to real progress feels slow. And anything that feels slow can feel wrong. Not logically wrong, but internally mismatched. Your system expects the speed of imagination. Reality delivers the speed of physics. That mismatch creates tension, and tension can be interpreted as a sign that something isn't working. So the brain suggests stopping, not because stopping is helpful, but because stopping removes the mismatch. The moment you stop, the tension disappears. And the disappearance of tension feels like relief. Relief reinforces hesitation. Relief is one of the strongest learning signals your brain has. Whenever discomfort decreases, your nervous system marks that moment as important. It assumes whatever happened right before the relief must have been useful. So if you hesitate and then feel relief, your brain links hesitation with safety. That link strengthens every time it repeats. Over time, hesitation stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like instinct. You don't decide to delay. Delay simply appears. And because it appears automatically, it feels natural. Natural responses rarely get questioned. They feel like part of you, like personality, like identity. But automatic does not mean permanent. Automatic patterns are learned patterns. And anything learned can be updated when new evidence is repeated enough times. The key word there is repeated, because a single action can't override a long-standing pattern, but repeated action can. This is why understanding matters more than force. Trying to overpower hesitation usually strengthens it. Force signals urgency. Urgency signals pressure. Pressure signals threat. And threat increases resistance. So the harder you push, the stronger the hesitation can feel. Understanding works differently. When you understand why a response exists, the response stops feeling mysterious. And when something stops feeling mysterious, it stops feeling absolute. You begin to see it as a process instead of a problem, a pattern instead of a flaw, a mechanism instead of a limitation. That shift changes your relationship with the hesitation itself. You're no longer fighting it, you're observing it. Observation creates distance. Distance creates clarity, and clarity creates options. Not instant change, but real choice. And real choice is what hesitation quietly removes. Choice returns slowly, not suddenly. Most people expect change to feel dramatic when it finally arrives. They imagine a moment of certainty, a burst of motivation, or a surge of confidence that signals they are ready. But real psychological change rarely feels dramatic. It feels subtle, quiet, almost ordinary. In fact, the earliest signs of change often feel like nothing at all. That's because your nervous system doesn't announce progress, it measures stability. And stability improves in tiny increments that don't feel impressive while they're happening. So when progress begins, it doesn't feel like progress, it feels like neutrality. And neutrality is easy to overlook. If you're waiting for a powerful internal signal before acting, you may miss the real signal entirely. The absence of resistance. Sometimes the most important shift isn't feeling ready. It's simply not feeling stopped. That small difference is where movement starts. There is also a hidden rule your brain follows: conserve energy whenever possible. Your mind is designed for efficiency, not productivity. It constantly evaluates whether an action is worth the energy it requires. If the reward seems uncertain, distant, or unclear, your system labels the action as inefficient, and inefficient actions are quietly resisted. This isn't laziness, it's biological budgeting. Your brain is always asking, is this worth it right now? If the answer isn't obvious, hesitation appears, not as a decision but as a sensation. Heaviness, reluctance, delay. Those sensations are signals, not verdicts. They don't mean the action is wrong, they mean the reward hasn't been proven yet. Once the brain experiences proof, even small proof, the calculation changes. The action stops feeling expensive and starts feeling worthwhile, but proof only arrives after action, which means the system requires evidence before it gives permission, even though the evidence can't exist until permission is ignored. This creates one of the most misunderstood loops in human behavior. You wait to feel ready before acting. But readiness only appears after action. So the signal you're waiting for is produced by the thing you're postponing. That loop can last for years without being noticed. From the inside, it feels like patience, or preparation, or caution. But from a systems perspective, it's simply a closed circuit. Closed circuits don't generate new outcomes. They recycle existing ones. To change the output, something inside the loop has to interrupt the pattern, not dramatically, not forcefully, just slightly differently than before. Small interruptions matter because the nervous system pays attention to change, not size. Even a tiny variation tells your brain something new is happening, and something new forces the system to update its predictions. Prediction updates are how patterns evolve, not through intensity, through difference. This is why gentle movement is often more powerful than strong effort. Strong effort can feel impressive, but it can also trigger internal alarms. Gentle movement rarely does. It slips past resistance because it doesn't look threatening. Your nervous system is less concerned with how big a step is and more concerned with how safe it feels. Safe steps get repeated. Repeated steps become familiar. Familiar actions stop triggering hesitation. So progress doesn't actually require force. It requires repetition that feels safe enough to continue. That principle explains why people sometimes succeed after they stop trying so hard. They haven't given up. They've changed the signal they send to their own system. Instead of urgency, they send safety. Instead of pressure, permission. And permission is a powerful internal cue, because when your brain believes movement is allowed, it stops trying to stop you. Many people assume progress is blocked by difficulty, but more often, progress is blocked by prediction. Your brain is constantly predicting what an action will feel like before you do it. If it predicts discomfort, strain, confusion, or failure, it prepares you to avoid that experience, not consciously, automatically. Prediction is protective, but it's also conservative. It prefers familiar outcomes over unknown ones, even if the familiar outcome is frustrating. That's because known discomfort is still predictable, and predictability feels safer than uncertainty. So when you think you're resisting effort, you're often resisting a prediction, not the task itself. And predictions can be wrong. But your brain won't update a prediction based on logic. It updates based on experience. That means the only way to correct an inaccurate prediction is to give your system new evidence. Not arguments, not pressure. Evidence. And evidence only appears when something actually happens. This is where patience becomes powerful. Not passive patience. Active patience. The kind that allows movement without demanding immediate results. Most people quit too early, not because they're incapable, but because their system hasn't had enough time to register new patterns yet. The brain doesn't change direction instantly. It waits to confirm that something different is really happening. Consistency provides that confirmation. Each small action acts like a vote. One vote doesn't decide anything, but repeated votes create a pattern, and patterns reshape expectation. Expectation reshapes behavior. So when you repeat an action, you're not just doing something. You're teaching your brain what to expect next time. Eventually, the expected action becomes the automatic one, and when an action becomes automatic, it stops feeling difficult. Not because it changed, but because your prediction did. What once felt heavy begins to feel neutral, and neutral is sustainable. Understanding this changes how you interpret your own hesitation. Instead of seeing resistance as a flaw, you can see it as information. Instead of judging it, you can read it. Resistance often points to uncertainty, not incapability. It signals that your system doesn't have enough evidence yet to feel safe moving forward. That distinction matters, because if hesitation is treated like failure, pressure increases, and pressure strengthens resistance. But if hesitation is treated like data, curiosity increases, and curiosity reduces resistance. Curiosity tells your brain there is no immediate threat, and when threat signals decrease, openness increases. Openness is where change becomes possible. Not because something outside you changed, but because something inside you relaxed. When the system relaxes, movement doesn't need force. It happens naturally, the same way a door opens once pressure is removed from the other side. Often the obstacle isn't effort, it's tension. So if progress has ever felt slow, heavy, or strangely difficult, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something is working exactly as designed. Your mind is not trying to hold you back. It's trying to protect you using predictions built from past experience. Those predictions can delay change, but they can also be updated, not instantly, not forcefully, but reliably. Every small action you repeat gives your system new information. Every calm step teaches your brain that movement is safe, and safety is the signal your mind has always been waiting for. Change doesn't begin when you feel ready. It begins when your system feels safe enough to continue. That's why progress can look quiet from the outside and ordinary from the inside, because real change rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. It just feels possible. And when something finally feels possible, your mind stops resisting and starts allowing.